I was 16 years old, standing in the middle of our living room, staring at my father as he ripped up my college application papers, the ones I'd spent months perfecting, the ones that were my ticket out. And his words, hissed through clenched teeth, were the last thing I ever truly heard from him. "You're a disgrace. Get out of my house." He didn't just tell me to leave, he disowned me, cut me out of his life, his will, and our family portrait, all because of a perfectly constructed, venomous lie spun by my younger brother, Ethan. And here's the thing that still keeps me awake at night, the question I need every single one of you to answer. Was I wrong for waiting until I was financially stable? Until I had everything to lose? To finally expose Ethan's truth and bring my father's entire, carefully constructed world crashing down around him? Tell me, honestly, if you would have done the same thing, because I still don't know if the relief of justice was worth the utter, brutal destruction that followed. To understand how I got to that moment, to the point where my own father looked at me with pure disgust, you have to understand the dynamic of our family, which was less of a unit and more of a subtle, constant performance orchestrated around Ethan. Ethan, 2 years younger than me, was the golden child. Not in the typical sense of being an academic star or a star athlete, but in the sense that he was fragile, sensitive, and perpetually misunderstood. He had minor allergies and anxiety, which my parents, my father especially, interpreted as a divine calling to protect and shelter him from the harsh realities of the world. I, on the other hand, was the resilient one, the one who got good grades without being asked, the one who worked a part-time job, the one who could handle things. I was the rock, the reliable one, which I slowly realized meant I was also the expendable one. For years, every argument, every shattered vase, every missed curfew was silently, implicitly laid at my feet, because I could take it. Ethan, bless his fragile heart, could not. It started small. When I was 14, Ethan broke my mother's antique lamp while throwing a tantrum over a video game. When Dad came home, Ethan was already sobbing dramatically on the couch, saying he was too scared to tell the truth, and before he could even confess, I stepped in and said I'd knocked it over while dusting, just to make the immediate storm pass. Dad lectured me for being clumsy and careless, and Ethan gave me a tiny, secretive smirk over my father's shoulder. That smirk, that's the thing that should have been my first warning. The pattern accelerated. If Ethan failed a test, it was because I had distracted him the night before. If he forgot to do a chore, it was because I must have done it already and hadn't communicated properly. My father, a man whose pride was his biggest weakness, believed every word because believing me would mean acknowledging that his precious, sensitive Ethan was manipulative, and his reality couldn't handle that contradiction. The real breaking point, the lie that cost me everything, happened during my junior year. I was applying for an early admission program at a highly competitive university out of state, a university that offered a full scholarship and a chance to study marine biology, my absolute passion. It was everything I had ever worked for. My dad, a blue-collar man who believed college was a waste of time, unless it was a local trade school, was already lukewarm about the whole thing, but I knew the scholarship would convince him. The night before the final application was due, I had left the completed paperwork, including my meticulously written essay and recommendation letters, on my desk before heading out for my shift at the local library. I got home late, exhausted, and went straight to bed, planning to do one final review and submit in the morning. That night, something else happened. Ethan, who was secretly dating a girl my parents vehemently disapproved of, a rebellious girl from the wrong side of town, who was apparently a terrible influence, had been caught by my dad sneaking back into the house at 3 a.m. Dad was furious, absolutely incandescent. He was screaming, threatening to ground Ethan for the rest of his senior year, threatening to take his phone and laptop. Ethan, cornered and terrified of losing his girlfriend, knew he had to pull out the nuclear option. The next morning, I woke up to my father's thunderous rage, not directed at Ethan, but at me. I walked into the kitchen to find my application papers shredded, literally in pieces, scattered on the floor. My father was holding the scraps, his face pale with fury. Ethan was sitting at the table, his head in his hands, making soft, heart-wrenching sounds of sorrow. What happened next was a carefully rehearsed masterpiece by my little brother. He looked up, teary-eyed, and stammered out the story. He hadn't broken curfew to see his girlfriend. Oh no. He had come home late because he was trying to help me. He said he'd stumbled upon a hidden stash of drugs in my room, a small bag of something he described vaguely but dramatically. which he said he'd found hidden inside my favorite hardback book. He claimed he'd confronted me about it the previous night, and I had shoved him and threatened him if he ever told anyone. He said he had stayed out late, wandering the streets, agonizing over what to do, finally deciding to come home and tell Dad the truth. But before he could, he saw the college papers, and in a moment of panic, he said, he thought, if Dad finds out, he'll disown her, and she'll be ruined. Maybe if I just tear up the application, she'll have to stay home, and she'll be safe. His entire narrative was that he, the innocent, loving brother, had risked everything, including taking the blame for being out late, to protect me from my own dangerous habits. My father, who had a deep-seated fear of drug use stemming from a family friend's tragedy, didn't even ask to see the evidence. He looked at the tears in Ethan's eyes, the scattered papers, and then at me, standing there speechless, reeling from the sheer audacity of the lie. I tried to explain, to tell him I didn't even know anyone who did drugs, that my book was right there, untouched, that this was Ethan's revenge for getting caught out late. But it was too late. The emotional hook was set. My father, with a mix of despair and rage, didn't believe a word. He saw my shock as guilt, my protestations as further proof of my disgraceful character. He didn't investigate, didn't check my room, didn't talk to my boss at the library or my teachers. He just looked at me and delivered the final blow. You're a disgrace. Get out of my house. My mother, typically quiet, just watched, her silence a profound betrayal, her eyes fixed on her fragile son. I left that day with just a backpack and the clothes on my back. I couch-surfed for a few weeks, worked double shifts, and eventually found a tiny rundown apartment near the community college. I submitted my application to the local college late, with a desperate plea letter explaining the situation, omitting the drug lie, but explaining the paperwork had been destroyed. I had to take out massive student loans, but I made it work. I started over, alone. For the next 10 years, I saw my family only at required holiday gatherings, where I was treated like an unpleasant acquaintance. The prodigal daughter, who hadn't really returned. Ethan, meanwhile, thrived in the space I had left. He went to a good university, thanks to my father's full financial backing, and got a degree in business. A degree Dad highly approved of. He became my father's business partner, the heir apparent to the small construction firm my father had built from the ground up. He got married to a nice girl, bought a house, and had a beautiful daughter. He had everything I should have had, built on the rubble of my life. I never told anyone the full truth, not even my mother, who I knew wouldn't risk her comfortable life to stand up to my father. I kept my head down, finished my degree, and eventually got my dream job as a senior researcher for a major environmental organization, making a fantastic salary and traveling the world. I had built my own success, 1,000 miles away from their toxic sphere, but every success felt hollow, tainted by the injustice. Every time I looked at my loans, every time I saw Ethan's perfectly curated social media life, the resentment festered. It became a cold, calculating resolve. So that's the situation I was in. I had lost my family, my college fund, and my father's respect at 16, all because of a single, malicious lie that my father eagerly accepted because it was easier than confronting his fragile son. And 10 years later, I had the financial stability, the distance, and crucially, the ability to walk away from any consequence my father could throw at me. Ethan, who was now poised to take over the family business completely, had everything to lose. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have let sleeping dogs lie, focusing on your own success and finding peace? Or would you have risked the final brutal confrontation, knowing that the truth would shatter the one thing Ethan cherished most? His perfect life and my father's unwavering belief in him. What is the cost of absolute justice, and is it always worth paying? I decided that the truth had to come out, and it had to happen publicly at a time and place where my father could not retreat or deny it. I didn't want revenge. I wanted the record set straight, and I wanted Ethan to finally face a consequence. The opportunity came at my father's 60th birthday party, a massive affair where he was announcing his retirement and the official transition of the business to Ethan. I flew in, dressed impeccably, and sat quietly through the speeches, watching Ethan beam under the praise. My father stood up, glass in hand, and raised a toast to his dutiful and loyal son, Ethan. And then, In a moment that felt like it was choreographed for maximum pain, he glanced at me and made a veiled comment about how some people choose an easier, more selfish path, earning a chuckle from the crowd who all knew the family legend of my teenage disgrace. That was my cue. I stood up, cleared my throat, and calmly asked if I could say a few words. My father looked annoyed, but couldn't deny me the mic in front of 200 guests. I started simply praising my father's work ethic, and then I pivoted. Before we celebrate the passing of the torch to Ethan, I said, my voice steady, there is a torch that was passed 10 years ago, a burden of a lie that I've carried for a decade, and tonight I'm laying it down. I then recounted the entire story, starting with the antique lamp and moving chronologically through every lie every time I took the fall, right up to the morning the papers were shredded. I presented it not as an accusation, but as a historical fact. I looked directly at Ethan, who was now white as a sheet, frantically shaking his head at my father, and I delivered the final devastating blow. "Dad," I said, "turn." Ing to him. "Do you remember Ethan's girlfriend, Sarah? The one you strictly forbade him from seeing?" Ethan didn't break curfew to dispose of my alleged drugs. He broke curfew to sneak back from Sarah's house, and the moment you caught him, he shredded my college application and invented a drug story to save himself from losing his phone. The reason you never found any drugs is that there were never any drugs. I was disowned, and my entire future was rewritten, because my brother chose his phone over my life. The silence in the room was absolute, heavy enough to crush bones. Ethan finally screamed, "That's not true! She's lying!" But I was ready. I reached into my small evening bag and pulled out a stack of printouts. "A few months ago, I finally got the courage to call Sarah," I said, and she was happy to confirm the timeline, the late night, and more importantly, the fact that Ethan confided the truth to her the very next day, worried about what he'd done. She sent me the transcripts of those messages, and I've printed them out for everyone who wants a closer look. I set the stack on a nearby table. My father, his face mottled with disbelief and sudden dawning horror, looked from the printouts to Ethan. In that moment, the golden child shattered. Ethan saw his future, the company, the house, the perfect life, evaporating, and he fled the room, leaving his wife crying at their table. My father didn't chase him. He just looked at me, a man stripped bare, and whispered, "It can't be true." The party ended in chaos. The aftermath was exactly what I expected. The business transfer was immediately put on hold, and my father, realizing he had sacrificed one child for the lie of the other, had a complete emotional breakdown. He called me the next day, not to apologize but to confirm the details, needing to hear it one more time. I was honest, telling him how the decade of rejection had felt. Ethan tried to deny it all, but the transcripts were damning, and Sarah, tired of being a secret, publicly confirmed them. Ethan's wife filed for divorce, disgusted that her entire marriage was built on a lie that destroyed a person's life. The business never fully recovered from the public scandal and the internal rupture. My father, in his desperation, offered me a position in the company, a desperate attempt to fix things and salve his conscience, but I declined. "I don't need your business, Dad," I told him. "I already built my own." What I needed was a father, and that position has been permanently vacant. I walked away from the entire family drama, leaving them to deal with the fallout of their own complicity and my brother's malice. I finally felt a sense of peace, but it was a cold, hard peace. I got my justice, but I lost any hope of a functional family. I don't talk to any of them anymore. The moral of this story is messy, and I think I'm still figuring it out. Sometimes the thing you lose isn't as important as the person you become while recovering it. I lost a father and a brother, but I gained myself, my career, and my independence. Maybe the lesson is that when someone shows you who they are, especially when they lie to save themselves, believe them the first time, not the 10th time. And sometimes, the most successful revenge is simply living a better life than the person who tried to destroy you, but in my case, a little dramatic public exposure didn't hurt either. If you felt the anger and the betrayal right along with me, please do me a favor. Like this video if you were on my side and you think I did the right thing by finally telling the truth. Hit that subscribe button for more deep dives into the messy, unbelievable reality of family drama, because you know I've got more stories just waiting to be shared. And, most important, NT, Share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section below. Was I right to wait, or should I have exposed him sooner? Let me know. I'll see you all in the next story.